The number one reason I recommend having a coach is for accountability and an outside perspective, regardless of what kind of coach you hire, someone that's going to hold you to taking action both on your business and not just in your business so that you can continue to grow and scale and thrive. That is the biggest benefit I feel like anybody gets out of one-on-one coaching.
Welcome to another episode of the Health Coach Academy podcast. I'm your host, Omar Cumberbatch of OmarCumberbatch.com. So excited for you to join in and listen to a topic that I struggle with myself. So I really selfishly am very pleased to have Danielle Hendon on the show. Danielle is the founder and owner of Corners CFO, and that's a firm offering financial advisory services to small business owners on a scale that fits their company and budget. So she has decades of experience in corporate finance and accounting, but her passion is for small business owners specifically. So she brings the benefit of big business financial analysts to entrepreneurs like ourselves. And I really enjoyed this conversation because it does put into focus something that I think that I've avoided for a lot of years when I'm starting out in business. It's like, you know, we like to coach, we like to get into the weeds, and we like to help people, but the money is the money. We have to be very aware of it and really take stock of what we're actually doing. So Danielle just breaks that down for us lovely, and I'm so appreciative that she joined the show. So as always, please leave a rating and review on iTunes so I can continuously get awesome guests like Danielle. So let's jump into the show. Hey Danielle, how are you today?
I am so good. I'm really excited to be here. Any chance I can get to maybe get somebody to look at their numbers is a win in my book.
Yeah, no, it's definitely a common theme where it's an issue for everybody, including, of course, business owners, health coaches, and everything. It's something like, I think we want to keep our head in the sand a lot of the times when it comes to this kind of stuff. So it's always
Absolutely.
refreshing when someone like yourself comes on the show to teach us something about it and the importance. So I want to give you an opportunity to tell us about yourself a little bit, as far as your origin story. And then we could dive into some questions I have, geared up for you, and so that we can help these health coaches and myself out.
Awesome. So origin story, I'm going to take you way back because I think it's funny when I tell people I actually started college as a music major. I did not plan on going into accounting and finance or anything like that. I followed my passion and my creativity, but then I had an English professor that had us write about the future of our career. And I realized very quickly that music is more about who you know and not what you can do. And I didn't know if I'd ever be able to afford myself if I kept on that path. So I still love music. I love supporting it. I love watching it. I love participating in church and choirs. But I decided to try out some accounting classes. I had a couple of friends that were in the business school and dove into accounting and absolutely loved it. So I haven't looked back since, got my master's and went into public accounting like most people do when they get an accounting degree. And then I started a family and I realized 80-hour work weeks and a newborn don't really mesh very well together. So being in the Houston area, a lot of my experience was with oil and gas. So when I left public accounting, I went to an oil and gas company in downtown Houston. And I was there for about a decade. But they went through bankruptcy and they came out the other side owned by the bankers who started slicing and dicing. And as I'm sure many of your audience feels, when the pandemic hit, it became this completely different perspective for so many people. Don't get me wrong, there was a lot of really awful things about that time, but there was this small silver lining where we all got to slow down. And for me, it was a completely different perspective of parenting. I will admit I was a bit of a workaholic mom. When you love what you do it a lot. And I was now home with my kids and I was get them to school, get to know the teachers, get to know the swim coach, get to know the other moms and the friends. And I didn't want to give that up. So I had a really unique opportunity when the company laid me off to say, I'm going to try something new. I want to try and see what it looks like to build a business that gives me the flexibility to do what I love doing, but also be there for the people that I love the most. And I never thought I'd be grateful for a bankruptcy, but having walked that business from a billion-dollar business down to like 20 people, I knew how to take these big financial concepts and make them fit a really small business because I'm the one that gets the call when the controller's like, hey, we've only got one person left. How do you want me to do this?
Mm.
So taking those concepts and now bringing them to small business owners in a way that isn't increasing shareholder value or share price like it does in corporate, but we actually get to increase livelihoods and legacies for small business owners. And that feels amazing.
No, that's awesome. So it's a really powerful story considering the size of where you came from and how you basically made it so personal for these small business owners to deal with. What was some of the differences that you saw? Specifically, how does it translate because of that experience with working with such a large company to go into the transition for these small companies?
I think one of the very first things that I had to work on personally and realize is accounting is full of a lot of jargon. And I knew this because oil and gas is full of even more jargon. But there's a lot of language that doesn't make sense to small business owners. And when it comes to implementing accounting and finance for a small business owner, it becomes about so much more than the numbers. It's the story the numbers tell and helping a business owner translate that into plain English so that they can take action on it.
I'm so glad that was one of my questions because I was going to ask you, what are some baseline terms that you start saying and it just goes over our poor heads and we're like, what the heck is she talking about kind of stuff? And why are those terms specifically important for running small businesses?
I tell my clients all the time, actually, if there's a single word that comes out of my mouth that you don't understand, stop me. Because if you don't understand it, you're not going to use it.
Yeah.
So we try really hard not to use any of those terms. But some of the things that your clients might hear or come across when they're talking to another CPA for taxes or bookkeeping or something like that, they're going to talk about financial statements, which is kind of those reports that you can run out of your bookkeeping. Most businesses I know in the US use QuickBooks for their bookkeeping. Some use Xero. Xero's a really common tool in the UK. But when you do that, you can run reports that are called financial statements. And those consist of 3 different reports, one of which you will never see me use in our business, but I'll tell you what it is.
Okay.
So you have the balance sheet, which is going to be basically everything you own and everything you owe, including what your business is worth from an equity perspective. That is what's going to show up on your balance sheet. It's the first thing we talk to all of our clients about in our framework. It's probably the least looked at financial statement, but it tells the story of your financial foundation. What is everything sitting on? It's also really important from an accounting perspective when it comes to something we call reconciliations. I want you to think of it like, and I'm going to date myself here, when you're balancing a checkbook and a bank account, there's going to be a difference sometimes between the checkbook and the bank account, and you reconcile the two. You have to do the same thing in your business when it comes to your bank account and your balance sheet accounts, and your bookkeeper should be doing that for you. As long as it reconciles, we can take the next step and look at what is called the income statement, or some people refer to it as a profit and loss statement. That's going to show everything you've earned and everything you've paid, so your revenue and your expenses. That's going to sit on the income statement. The third financial statement is the cash flow statement. And we actually don't use this at all. I tell people that the cash flow statement is the bane of a lot of accountants' existence, and it makes no sense to business owners. It uses terms like operating cash flow and investing cash flow, and we don't want to see that. We want to know what was the sales that hit my account, what was the payroll that hit my account, and what was the credit card, because that's usually where all the other expenses are sitting that hit my account.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, see, that's one of the things that I find interesting because you did bring up certain things that I know as a health coach starting out, I did not have I don't want to say interest. I just didn't even know that that was a thing. Most of us are trying to operate, say, on one-on-one clients and maybe some group coaching. And it sounds like it's a bigger operation than it is, maybe. And then that may be the reason why health coaches may have like this resistance to it. How would you have health coaches utilize those specific sheets that and things like of that nature?
So a lot of smaller business owners, when they're just starting out, do what I like to call bank statement accounting. It doesn't necessarily matter what's in your balance sheet or your P&L. You're looking at what's in the bank account because at the
Mm-hmm.
end of the day, cash is what makes or breaks a business. And there is nothing wrong with bank statement accounting, but it
Mm-hmm.
doesn't give you enough information to make really good decisions in your business. It tells you what money is available, but it doesn't necessarily tell you where it went or who it
Right.
came from.
That makes, and I think that's definitely where a lot of us are operating at. So what is it, in other words, the advantage of expanding that, and how could that actually help us make more money, actually?
Absolutely. So when I told you the first step we go through with clients is kind of that balance sheet, make sure we've got the foundation. The
Mm-hmm.
very next step we do is revenue because most business owners can tell you what their revenue is, but they can't usually tell you what their profit margin is. So if I asked you today, what is your most profitable service? What is the most profitable thing you offer people? And especially as a health coach, where you are very service driven, it's all about your time. People never remember to value their time and the hours that go into providing a service when they're thinking about revenue. They just think, okay, we made $2,000 this month on this client. We're great. But that $2,000 has to pay you, it has to pay the bills, it has to pay the website, it has to pay all these other things. So we want to understand from a revenue perspective, and this is where you do need some books to get to this number.
Mm.
What are your profit margins? My goal with service providers is before we even consider what we will call operating expenses, which is step 3 in our process, your profit margin on a service should be 50-50. You need that other 50% to save for profit and operating expense and all the other things. But if you're not charging more than twice what you're putting into it, you're going to start seeing yourself drop and flounder and have trouble getting to that next level of growth that you might be trying to achieve.
Yeah, that's definitely a good way to put it. That makes definitely a lot of sense. So I'm thinking about operating costs and some common expenses. What are some of those expenses that we are not even, I don't say we're not aware of, because I think we are aware of the expenses. We just overlook them. How
Yep.
about that?
Some of my favorite, so when we look at expenses with business owners, we break it into 3 categories. We pull all of their data together and we look at what is being spent where, what are the commonalities, what vendors, what frequency. But then there's going to be what I call required expenses. I do
Right.
not know a business owner that can run a business today without cell phone and internet, and most likely also some kind of website costs in order to have that presence. And then you're going to have what I like to call the personal perks. So the things that your tax CPA tells you to go ahead and run through the business because they make a really good business deduction, but they're not necessarily adding value to your business. They're adding value to the business owner in things that they would have otherwise paid that they now get to run through the business. One of my favorite examples of this is when CPAs will recommend you put your kids on payroll. Great business deduction when you've got a defensible job description and can use it. And maybe your kids are doing marketing or they're doing organizational assistant type work. Great business deduction, but they're really not adding value to the business. I guarantee you could get it done better, faster, cheaper somewhere else. But by putting your kids on payroll, you can then invest it, or you can pay for the kids' activities, or you can do all these things in a personal component that are beneficial to you. So those are our personal perks, tax deductions that benefit the business owner personally. Then everything else in your business that you're spending from an operating expense perspective is an investment in the business. And one of my favorite examples to give here is coaching and education. So I, as a CPA, have to go get education units. I have to have a certain number of CPEs every year to maintain my license. But I also know there are places I can go get that CPE for free or like next to nothing or really boring, pay $100 and just get it done, versus going to a conference and paying thousands of dollars to go to this conference and get trained on something. When you have that discrepancy there, the true required cost for me to maintain my license is probably a couple $100s. If I choose to go to that conference, now it's becoming an investment in my business. What is my business getting back in time, money, or both from that conference? Do I have time to implement what I'm learning? Is it going to help me raise my rates? Is it going to increase revenue in some way? Or is it going to make me more efficient and decrease my costs? How does that conference give me a return on investment? And those are going to be the 3 types of expenses you see in kind of that operating expense section below your revenue.
So in that example, I'm curious of how you feel of someone like as a health coach who's just starting out. Do you recommend that they go to these conferences over just the cheaper certifications, say, that they can just pick up online?
I can't say for certain with health coaches. I don't know exactly what's available for you guys. I do think a lot of times when it comes to education, you get what you pay for. And I jumped from corporate into business ownership, and the very first thing I hired was a coach. I knew that I don't know what I don't know, and I need somebody else to help me figure it out. Mm-hmm. So I think there's value in putting money into those things, but you have to be willing to implement and take action. Otherwise, you're just spending money and spinning wheels.
Mm-hmm. And all those conferences are deductible and all.
Absolutely.
So some value to it in that context. But like you said, implementation is paramount, and that you should just take advantage of all the things that you do learn. Yeah, I mean, this is fascinating because I find myself debating on a lot of these things, like whether or not to invest in certain things or to pay someone like yourself who operates a firm. I'm also very big on noticing that health coaches generally like platforms that may integrate certain things and like eliminate certain things. And I know you may have said QuickBooks and such, but okay, can you talk about anything that you may have come across that may be beneficial, that if a health coach is bold enough to tackle, that they would maybe be into and purchase?
From a software component?
Yeah.
So QuickBooks is really great at bookkeeping. And one of the first financial purchases I think any business owner should do is bookkeeping. Mm-hmm. You can find bookkeepers that specialize in small business and startups if that's where you're at, and their price point is made for that. You can find larger bookkeepers that specialize in the more complex, and you start to get all kinds of fun, crazy courses, all the things that are going to help you keep track of that as well. Definitely not worth your value as a business owner to figure out how to use QuickBooks. So the very first financial purchase I recommend is either QuickBooks or Xero or something that's built for bookkeeping. I know a lot of people in the service industry like to find a CRM that they love, and they'll try to do the bookkeeping there. And it does invoice tracking, but it doesn't necessarily do bookkeeping.
Right. Yeah, that's what I was kind of alluding to, like those CRMs are. I know that some of them are very, very voluminous in the scope of what they cover. So I was just curious if that was something that, and then again, I'm not actually pushing health coaches to do any of these things, but I'm just kind of spinning my own wheels and knowing where I came from and all these are the questions. We're trying to cut costs. We're trying to cut corners. Mm-hmm. Do you recommend that? And I kind of know the answer, of course, because you said that you did, as soon as you jumped out, in your own business, you got a coach.
Yep.
Obviously, we should be looking for services that, like yourself, that provide these things for us. And why do you specifically think that's the case?
The number one reason I recommend having a coach is for accountability. And an outside perspective, regardless of what kind of coach you hire, someone that's going to hold you to taking action both on your business and not just in your business, so that you can continue to grow and scale and thrive. That is the biggest benefit I feel like anybody gets out of one-on-one coaching.
Mm-hmm. And talk about your company a little bit. I'm curious to see, like, just what do you guys offer, and what do you think that a health coach could maybe benefit most if they were to call you up and ask for your assistance?
Absolutely. So I have a passion for all business owners, and we keep trying to find ways to make sure that we can serve what I will call the micro business and the startups just as much as we serve the business that's been around for 3, 5, 10, 20 years. Mm-hmm. But we serve everybody through that same 6-part framework. So we walked through kind of 1, 2, and 3. Step 4 is the budget. So we build out a budget for your year, which is like a roadmap for your business. Where do you want things to go? And then step 5 is where the magic happens, because it's when we start comparing the budget to the actuals and looking at what those differences are, because the goal is not actually to hit a budget. I know that sounds crazy. We don't necessarily want to hit the budget. We want to understand why we're not hitting the budget. And does that mean we need to change our expectations, which is changing the budget, or we need to change the actions we're taking in the business so we can get back on budget? And really understanding the story that those numbers tell. And then the very last step, because we don't believe in cash flow statements, is to do a cash flow forecast that looks very similar to the budget. But the movement of your money is going to have slightly different timing than the movement of your P&L, your profit and loss statement. So things might hit your revenue, but they haven't actually booked, especially on that like 1-day lag. Let's imagine you got paid by somebody today, and then tomorrow's the end of the month, and it didn't actually get into the bank account. So there's going to be a little bit of lag. The actual cash in your bank account may not always reflect your profit and loss statement. There are also 3 things that will never show up in a budget or a profit and loss statement because they actually sit on your balance sheet. And those are going to be profit distributions, which I hope everybody is taking. I'm a huge fan of profit first. And then they're going to be any payments you have on debt, which if anyone's listening to this and feeling like, oh my gosh, I haven't paid the credit cards off, or we've got this loan or these things, I want you all to know that it takes money to make money. That is a very true phrase, and nobody should feel bad for having debt. There are bills to be paid while you build a business, and that takes time. So any debt on the books is going to show in your cash flow statement. And then last but not least, because we're coming up on tax time when we're recording this, I want to make sure everybody's saving for their taxes. We don't ever want that to be a surprise to anybody at the end of the year. We want to be setting that aside all year long. So that's kind of our 6-step framework. And then we work with clients everywhere from a 1-hour strategy call where it can be, hey, I'm struggling with this part of things. You've heard me talk about the framework before. How can I look at revenue? How do we do this? And we'll just sit down one-on-one for an hour and we'll go through it together. We also we're working on having a course that we're hoping to launch this year that would be available in kind of a 6-part email sequence that we would send out to people and show you how to do these steps in your business yourself. Because I know not everybody can afford a CFO, but everybody deserves to have a budget and feel like they have control over where their business is going. So that's something we've got in the works. If you stay tuned, hopefully we'll have that up this year. And then the majority of our clients, I'm going to be honest, are usually in about the 6-figure range when it comes to services. And they're growing and scaling and hiring mini-me's and additional people on their team. And in that space, we work one-on-one and we do the doing for you so that we go through those 6 parts and we do all the analysis and the analytics and tracking and budgeting and all the things. And we just sit down with our clients once a month and go through what is the story that we're reading right now? Hey, why were we $100 off on that cell phone bill? Because did we not pay it? Did you put it on a personal card and we need to make sure that gets into your books and that you get the deduction for it? Like, what's going on here? Or I have clients that are upwards into the $10 million range where we're looking at things on a weekly basis. What does cash flow look like this week? Who are we paying? How are we doing it? What are the processes that we need in place?
Yeah, so you definitely experience with a wide range of sizes as far as companies. What do you think is the minimum amount or maybe entry point for a health coach to say, hey, you know what, I do want to outsource this and I want to hire your company. What do you think is like probably the minimum threshold?
Once we get the course up and running, I would say it's less of a dollar and more of a, I want you to be paying yourself before you pay me. If you cannot afford to pay yourself yet, you need to figure that out. And maybe it's just a 1-hour strategy call with somebody to figure that piece out before we dive into like, how can you be your own CFO? And then with clients that hire us to do the doing for them, that's usually upwards of 6 figures in revenue.
And that's like the theory of just working more on your business instead of in your business.
Absolutely.
Okay, so I'm glad that came up because I was kind of concluding with mindset shifts. Like, what do you think some mindset shifts should occur just for health coaches to be in in a more profitable position. And again, I think this is, I always pick up my health coaches. That's my audience, but this is a coaching problem as well. I see a lot of coaches, life coaches, even as well, who have these mind shift. Well, they need a mind, a mind shift. They have a
I mean, let's
mindset.
be honest, if you talk to a single business owner that says they don't have mindset issues, they're lying.
Right. So what would you recommend that to be?
From a money mindset perspective, I think
Yeah.
the very first thing is that pay yourself. And if you take nothing else away from this and you're kind of in that startup phase and feel like you can't afford anything else, please go look at Profit First by Mike Michalowicz. Phenomenal book, one of my favorites. We use a lot of those kind of methodologies in our business and in the people that we work with. Mm-hmm. Beyond that, and really what that is about is paying yourself first and trusting that even as a more creative person, you are creative enough to figure out how to pay the rest of the bills. But if you pay the rest of the bills first, inevitably, if that money's gone, you will never pay yourself. You will always put everything else in front. But you've got to learn to put yourself first, put your mask on first, so that your business can stay around. I know a lot of health coaches are very heart-centric, and our business is very heart-centric and passion-focused. And it can get very easy to just want to help everybody. But if you can't take care of yourself, you're not going to be able to stay in business and help those people. Oh, so that would be the very first mindset shift I think everybody's got to work on.
And it's interesting. You're not the first person to mention that book. I'm gonna get it now because I think it's time. Because I hear it so often. What does it look like to pay yourself first? What are we talking about exactly?
I always recommend starting small. If you've never done it, if you're in a position where you just kind of check the bank account and figure out when you can pay yourself, then start small. Say you get paid. What it looks like to pay yourself first is literally that. You pay yourself first. You get a new client, or you have an existing client that's paying you monthly. The money comes in the door. You pay yourself before you pay anything else. Start small. Do it with, let's say, 10%. Set aside 10% of revenue, even if it's 1%. This is about building a habit of changing the way that you do business from a financial perspective. You're going to pay yourself first, and then you can pay the other bills, and then we can see what's left and take our profit distributions if that's the pace you want to go at. I think in order to stay in business, we all have to be paying ourselves a livable wage. But so often what I see business owners do, especially in that startup phase, is not necessarily run up a business credit card, because we tend to be a little bit better about business credit cards, but you're running up that personal credit card to astronomical levels because you're not paying yourself.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. I've just read a book. I wish I knew it off the top of my head. And it was a mindset shift specifically around debt, and how if debt is actually a good thing, especially in the business world.
Yes. That is the other thing I talk about so much, is the mindset on debt.
Yeah. And it's like the way he framed it, and I don't know if you follow this, at least this belief, is that if someone's giving you money, that they have faith in you that you're going to repay them. And it looks like a little bit of a more positive spin on the whole concept of debt, because they have faith that you have the ability and the capabilities to make that money and kick it back.
And there's different types of debt, and they come with different burdens, I feel like. So in a business, you could have credit card debt. You could have what we call a term loan. So think of like a car loan is a term loan. You could have term loan debt, and you can have a line of credit. I recommend every single business owner I know gets a line of credit. We'll circle back to that one in a minute, but I want to talk about credit cards because that's probably the most common type of debt that everybody has. And it feels heavy. Credit cards can have this big number and you feel like you're supposed to pay it all down. So it always feels like there's $18,000 due, and where do I get that instead of the $350 that you might be paying for that month? It feels heavy, and the burden of that mentally can be very hard to get out from under. So when a client comes to me with a lot of credit card debt and we don't have a clear path out of it that I can show them in the cash flow forecast, we will actually go talk to banks and see, can we convert that to a term loan? Because just that little shift and having a monthly payment that feels like a car note is a complete mindset shift and difference in the mental burden from an $18,000 credit card to, oh, this is just like a couple $100 a month, like my car note, like we've got this.
Mm-hmm.
And then the very last one being the line of credit is my absolute favorite form of what I'm going to call a safety net. So we all know from the pandemic and from what everybody's been through in these last few years that life is going to throw curveballs, and we've got to be prepared to adjust and figure out how to move forward. And even in this year, I've had numerous conversations with clients and prospects about the election year can do weird things to your sales. People tend to be a little more penny pitching, pull the purse strings. There's a lot of uncertainty in the air, the election and politics and all the chaos that's going on around us.
Mm-hmm.
And that can make things difficult where you just have to get through this piece of it. This is an environmental factor that's affecting your business. And if we can survive to the other side of it, things are going to be good again. This is not anything wrong with how you're doing your business.
Mm-hmm.
There's an external environmental factor that's causing things to be a little harder. So we've got to figure out, how do we survive to the other side of that?
Mm-hmm.
And that's where those safety nets can come in. And especially as a newer business owner, you probably don't have a safety net sitting in savings. But if you can go get a line of credit, it gives you access to money at a lower interest rate than your credit card to be able to make it through those things. And sometimes it is a factor in how we're doing things, and it's something the business needs time to pivot from. But if you are so stressed out about cash in the bank account that you can't, when you are so stressed out about cash in the bank account, you can't make that next best decision, because all you're going to take anything that life gives you. You're going to go, I need that and that and that. We need anything that's going to put money in the door. And that may not be your best business decision. So giving yourself a safety net gives you just enough room to mentally make that next best decision without making the wrong decision.
Mm-hmm. No, two interesting concepts, and I know we could talk about this all day. There's just the line of credit, and this is just like you just go to a bank and you ask for a line.
You
of
say,
credit.
hey, I'd like to get a business line of credit. And sometimes I've had banks say, well, how about we do this 0% interest credit card? Like we can do a 0 interest credit card. They're going to want to know why you want a line of credit. Mm-hmm. So it's always good to be like, oh, well, I'm growing this or we're hiring this. They want there to be a reason for it. Mm-hmm. But realistically, I just want you all to have a safety net.
Mm-hmm. And again, I did try to put it back into, like, I'm thinking of the health coach who's just starting out. Probably not available to them. You're thinking for startup costs specifically, or is this is definitely more in the 6-figure range where you're a little bit more established?
They're usually going to want some history. So I wouldn't say startup. Mm-hmm. You can find some credit unions, some smaller credit unions that like to work with small business owners as their basis. Mm-hmm. So I definitely recommend going to a local credit union over like the Chase or bigger banks, Bank of America, those kind. I'm not a fan of Wells Fargo, but the bigger banks in your area are going to have a little more red tape behind it. But I mean, even if it's a personal line of credit, I have a personal line of credit with one of my credit unions that we can lean into for a couple $1,000s. Like there's always options where you can create some cash flow safety nets in the process.
Mm-hmm. Love it. Love it. Listen, Danielle, you have been fantastic. I can't believe how quickly this show has gone. And it's a subject, like I said, that you've made very interesting. Like I have like 1,000 questions, and maybe we do a part 2 that's micro focus on certain things. But yeah, no, this is very inspiring that health coaches do have a way to get their businesses growing and really profit eventually, and there are avenues that we can actually be successful. So I thank you for sharing that. So I do want you to also share your company, your website, your social media handles, anything that we can keep up with what you're doing, because you do a wonderful service to not only health coaches, but all small businesses and businesses in general.
Absolutely. So I'm more on LinkedIn than I am on the others. You can find me on Instagram under Corners CFO, but it's easiest to find me on LinkedIn with my name, Danielle Hendon. And then we are actually going to have a landing page set up just for your listeners. So it'll be the number 4, not the word, the number 4, cornerscfo.com/Health Coach Academy.
Awesome. I appreciate that. I will definitely take advantage of it myself, and I know that the audience will as well.
Thank you so much for having me today.
Oh, it's a pleasure. Have a great rest of the day.
You too. Thanks.
Hope you enjoyed listening to today's episode of the Health Coach Academy podcast. If you did, jump over to iTunes and leave a rating and or review. It goes a long way in helping get this message out to our fellow health coaches and people in our industry. Also, if you can, jump over to my website, omarcumberbatch.com, where I give out a lot of freebies, including my 5-day sugar challenge for people who are having issues with sugar. And also for health coaches, I have the book, Hidden. It's the 6 not so obvious ways to get your clients unstuck. Have a great day.